Cooperstown announcement just around the corner. Who better to discuss Cooperstown and the Baseball Hall of Fame than our very own Matt Snyder, writer with CBS Sports for 15 years, member of the Baseball Writers Association of America, and now a two-time Hall of Fame voter. Matt, your ballot's in. How do we feel about it so far?
It's a relatively weak ballot, honestly. Like last year was my first year. We had CC Sabathia and Ichiro Suzuki both coming on for the first time. It's tough to have a ballot like that every single year. But like when I first started heavily covering this for CBS Sports, we could go back to like 2012, 2013, 2014. Those are some really, really crowded ballots. I mean, I often talk about how Kenny Lofton, I thought got completely jobbed. He only got 3.2% of the vote there. There are more than 10 Hall of Famers from now who were on that ballot. And that doesn't even include guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and Sammy Sosa. Like that was one of the most crowded ballots of all time. We don't have that concern this time around.
Yeah, a little bit of a different ballot this year. Maybe not as star-studded necessarily because like you mentioned, the PED or a lot of them are now no longer part of the conversation. Barry Bonds, no longer part of the ballot. Roger Clemens, no longer part of the ballot. Sammy Sosa, no longer part of the ballot. Now, a couple guys who have been involved in PED allegations, and some have even tested positive for PEDs, is guys like Alex Rodriguez and Manny Ramirez. And I have your ballot sitting right here in front of me, the official 2026 Hall of Fame ballot. Neither Alex Rodriguez nor Manny Ramirez are part of your ballot, or at least you did not vote them to be in to Cooperstown. Your reasoning behind that would be?
So once I first got into the BBWA, I knew that I would get a vote within 10 years. And I thought I'm going to have to come up with a way that's going to be consistent. And where I fell was if a player was suspended by Major League Baseball, once there was a joint drug agreement in place, then I was going to be a no. And that comes down to in the rules they send us, one of the things it says is a vote should be based on the player's record and his contributions to his team. And the contributions to the team and the player's record, it tells me that if you were, as an individual, trying to skirt the system and cheat the system and you got caught and you had to sit out for 50 games, then that you really, really cost your team in a big way. And with Manny, it was a 50-gamer in 2009 for the Dodgers when they were in a race. They were coming off a run to the NLCS, I believe, in 2008. And so to me, that was unbecoming of a Hall of Famer. A-Rod, the Yankees are always contending. And for him to get nailed with 211 games, I know it was shortened through the process of his appeal. But again, you're costing your team in a big way by being selfish and costing this many games. That's a huge, huge chunk of games. So I came down on anything before there was testing. I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to try to figure out, even if somebody admitted it, whatever. We don't know who was doing and who wasn't doing. Once there was a system in place, if you got nailed and suspended, you really cost your team by being selfish. So I decided those guys were going to be a no. I reserved the right to change in the future. I always said that I thought A-Rod was a special case because I think statistically he's one of the top 5 players in the history of baseball. And he didn't actually test positive. It was kind of a witch hunt. Remember, Major League Baseball followed him around, but he did get suspended. He's not close enough to 75% for me to think about changing my mind. But if he did get close, something one of my friends who's a fellow voter said a long time ago that stuck with me, and I want to be that same way. He said, I would rather be the reason somebody got into the Hall of Fame than one of the reasons that somebody did not get in. So if A-Rod got close enough, I would reconsider my stance on him.
By and large, or whether it's MLB administered test, whether they tested positive on a reported test outside of Major League Baseball, do you think Barry Bonds, Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, is there any way possibly down the line making some sort of exception to get them into Cooperstown?
Right now, no, it doesn't look like it. I mean, they just put in the committee era rule where if you don't get whatever the lowest vote total, it was like less than 5 votes out of the 12 on the panel, then you're not eligible again for the next cycle of that committee, which means it's at least 6 years until like Bonds and Clemens could get back on that ballot. And those committees often have current Hall of Famers, and a lot of the current Hall of Famers are hardcore no against guys who they know did something like that. Whether that's right or wrong, doesn't really matter. It's not for me to say right now. Just to answer the question, I think if they ever get in, it's going to be a long, long time from now.
A little quirky. Your all-time leader in Cy Youngs, not part of the Hall of Fame, Roger Clemens.
Yeah.
Your all-time home run champ, Barry Bonds, not part of the Hall of Fame. And your all-time hits leader, Pete Rose, rest in peace, no, not part of the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is so much different than your Pro Football Hall of Fame or National Basketball Hall of Fame. How difficult is it as a voter to decide you have 10 votes, or you can make 10 votes or 10 selections per year? How difficult is it for you to decide, am I going to vote 10 guys in? Last year, you did not vote 10 guys in. This year, you did vote 10 guys in. What goes into your mindset of how many you're going to vote on a given year?
So I had a little bit of a change in heart between last year and this year. Guys like Dustin Pedroia, Felix Hernandez, and Jimmy Rollins, I did not vote for last year, and I added this year. And I had only 9 last year, so I could have added one of those guys for a 10th vote. And my change of heart was because it takes 75% to get in. And there are people who send in blank ballots. There are people who only vote for 1 or 2 guys. And the process, the thought process for me is, if somebody doesn't vote for someone, it takes 3 yes votes just to cancel that out to get a guy in. And if we're looking at guys in the teens in the votes, they're probably never going to get in anyway. And as noted earlier, I kind of want to be part of the reason somebody might get in than part of the reason they don't get in or don't even have a chance to stay on the ballot. So I moved my line down. And if somebody would look at Jimmy Rollins or Dustin Pedroia and say, oh, you think Jimmy Rollins is a Hall of Famer? I would say, not necessarily. I voted for him, but I moved my line down for my votes because it's so hard for players to get in. I hope that makes sense in that I'm just giving them a chance to stay on the ballot. And if somehow 75% of the people vote for him, then he deserves to be in anyway. And I don't think it would be any great crime if somehow Mark Burley and Jimmy Rollins got into the Hall of Fame and I was part of the reason they got in. I would not kick myself over that at all. I would only kick myself over guys not staying on the ballot, such as in the past with Kenny Lofton and Johan Santana, who I thought they deserved much longer looks.
Are you worried at all about the Hall of Fame being watered down? Because
absolutely
a lot of people tend to critique it in that, oh, everybody gets a trophy nowadays. Everybody gets to go into Cooperstown. Is that a myth or is that a real concern?
Oh, it's a myth. It is still the hardest. Okay, I don't know every sport out there, but I know enough about basketball and football to know it's much harder to make the Baseball Hall of Fame than either one of those. And if you went back and you looked at players, the percentage of major leaguers in the Hall of Fame from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and even 50s, it's much, much higher than the percentage of players who made it from the 80s and 90s. Obviously, 2000s, some of those players are still active. Some of those players are still getting on the ballot. Of course, that's going to be lower. But the 80s and 90s guys have had their shake for a long time. And the percentage of players in the Hall of Fame are much, much lower from the 80s and 90s than they are from those decades far in the past. And if people say, well, Scott Rowland, they'll just let anybody in. I could say, have you heard of Travis Jackson, Ross Youngs, Wade Hoyt, Eparixi? I could keep going. I could keep throwing names at all these people, and they have never heard of any of these guys, but they're all in the Hall of Fame.
Now, you said you lowered your bar.
Yeah.
What is that bar? Because statistics have changed. Yeah. We have wins above replacement. We have statistical measurements up on Baseball Savant. Statistics that baseball writers have never used, frankly, in years before. So
that adds a layer, doesn't it?
How do you calculate a player's value? How do you calculate a player's greatness when the statistics that we're using nowadays here in 2026 are not even close to equivalent to what the statistics were back in 1970, back when Nolan Ryan was pitching in the 80s and 90s? How do you equate those?
It's difficult. If you need a starting point, I would recommend Jay Jaffe's JAWS system, which is on Baseball Reference, and I link to it a lot. It tries to take into account career WAR along with a 7-year peak in WAR and kind of combines those. So you get both the longevity candidates and the peak candidates in there, and you can measure them against all players in history at that position. And it gives an average of current Hall of Famers, and you can see where the line is. The traditional way of thinking, even though that's not a traditional stat by any means, would be anybody above the average Hall of Famer should definitely be in, and anybody close to it, then we can think about them a little bit. Now, again, that's just a starting point. By no means do I think it's a hard and fast rule. But when I say dip below, I think I mean dipping a little bit lower than that line. I have always said there are many, many different types of Hall of Famers. And if you just look at the starting pitchers on this ballot, let's take Felix Hernandez, peak candidate, best pitcher in baseball, or one of the best pitchers in baseball for a 5 or 6 year span, had a quick fall off, didn't accumulate a lot of counting stats. Then you look at Mark Burley, never really in Cy Young contention. You never would have said he's one of the best 3 or 4 pitchers in baseball, but his longevity was amazing. And he was one of the biggest workhorses in baseball for 15 years or up to close to 20, really. Those are two really, really different types of cases. And I'm a yes on both guys, because I always say a Hall of Famer can be any type of player, as long as I think he's an all-time great at something. And I think Burley was an all-time great workhorse compared to his peers in that era where the workload was getting ramped down by starting pitchers.
Now, let me ask you this, because Burley brings up a good point, and it kind of segues into a new question. It used to be a standard, okay, if you hit 500 home runs, you're in. If you get 3,000 hits, you're in. If you get 300 wins as a starting pitcher, you're in. You don't get wins as a starting pitcher nowadays in baseball anymore. So how much does it change for the rest of the voters? Maybe even like the older voters who are still kind of stuck in years past. Are they adapting, or is it still is the check marks or the benchmarks to get into the Hall of Fame still 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, 300 wins?
Some of those guys are not adapting, and they're sending in the blank ballots. And that's kind of the reason that caused me to dip down. And not necessarily, I think there was only one blank ballot we saw so far this cycle, but there have been somewhere 4 or 5. And the guys who only vote for like 1 guy or 2 guys or 3 guys. And that's why I kind of tried to lower my standards a little bit to try to cancel some of those out. But there has to be an adjustment at some point, especially on the wins. I don't know if we're ever going to see 300 wins again. I think maybe, and this is a different discussion for a different time, but the Dodgers in the World Series last year and the Dodgers all playoffs, maybe swing things back to the starting pitchers, become more of a main character and work deeper into games. But we're not all the way there yet. And to think about someone getting to 300 wins now is insanity. I mean, just John Lester's coming on next year's ballot, and he seems like one of those guys with a lot of longevity, top 4 of Cy Young voting at least 3 times. I want to say 3 off the top of my head. Played for some really great teams, won the World Series with the Cubs and the Red Sox. He won exactly 200 games, 100 more to get to 300. It just, and as we're a generation removed even from Lester, it's harder and harder. So there needs to be an adjustment, at least on that. I still think you can say like 3,000 hits should be automatic. It's hard for me to see somebody getting to 3,000 hits and saying no to them unless it's a PED, Rafael Palmeiro, A-Rod guy. 500 home runs got cheap a little bit. Maybe Giancarlo Stanton gets there. Maybe Kyle Schwarber gets there. Maybe it'll be tougher for those guys to get in. But so far, it's only the PED guys who got to 500 and didn't get in. But yeah, on the pitching side especially, I do think that we need to adjust.
Let's dive into individual players just a little bit here. Now, we talked PEDs. We talked guys who have admittedly said they have taken steroids or HGHs or performance-enhancing drugs. Now, Andy Pettitte admittedly said he has taken HGH before. He has said that on record. It is public information. Yeah. You voted Andy Pettitte in. Why?
Mm-hmm. I don't care about that. I mean, it was, as I said, I tried to draw my line on who was suspended when there was a system in place, and he was never suspended for anything. So anything that happened before the testing system with teeth was put in with suspensions, I'm not going to try to judge who did and who didn't. So it was never a moral stance, I guess was my thing. Is it was always, you cost 50 games of a Hall of Fame caliber player to your team because you were doing something individually. And a lot of people would say you didn't need to do that. So that to me became unbecoming of being a Hall of Famer. But before there was teeth in it, like, guys have been trying to cheat forever. Guys did greenies in the 60s and 70s. You could go back to Pud Galvin, who's a Hall of Famer, who tried to use monkey testosterone in the 1800s. The Pettitte thing, to me, it wasn't part of the equation. And in fact, he was part of my whole lowering the standards for starting pitchers thing. He's looped in with Mark Burley a little bit for me.
Monkey testosterone.
Look up Pud Galvin, man. Yeah.
That's a real thing?
Yeah.
I'll look into it for a buddy, not for me, of course. Now, you mentioned character clause. That's a big one. That loops into with the whole HGH, Pete Rose not being in the Hall of Fame with the betting. I have a feeling that's going to become more and more of a talking point too as we move forward in later years with gambling and sports gambling being such a big topic. But another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. How much does the character clause, which is part, or should be part, at least according by definition, by rule, part of your balloting, how much does the character clause in the Baseball Hall of Fame impact your voting?
So I tried to just take it as it also says voting should be based on their playing career or their playing record or something like that. So I tried to at least limit the scope to, as a player, did you do anything that cost your team in a big way, such as getting suspended for 50 games or 100 games? So for example, I don't love the fact that Andrew Jones had a domestic violence arrest on his record. I'm basically like, think I need to go take a shower after I vote for him, but it happened after his playing days. It didn't affect any team that he was on. There are guys who are already in the Hall of Fame who were not great people. So I was trying to just base it on playing record and how it affected the team at the time. I totally understand if people want to carry it over into the post-playing career, and I don't fault anybody for not voting, for example, for Andrew Jones because of that. I understand it totally, and I wouldn't get in an argument with anybody about it. And also, I think it's good that it's in there so we can use it if we need it. As an example, let's just say far in the future, a player is a no doubt like top 5 all-time player. He's a no doubt Hall of Famer, but he like murders 2 people after his playing career. I think we ought to have an escape hatch there so we don't feel like we have to vote for him. I would definitely use the character clause in that case. So I guess the line's in between those 2 things. It's blurry, but this is a subjective exercise. So you're never going to feel 100% confident that your line's in the right place all the time.
Brings me to my final question before we play a couple challenges at the end. If you could change one thing about the Hall of Fame's voting criteria and format as of right now, what would it be, if anything?
Yeah, I don't think I would. I think it's a good system. I think 75% is a really, really hard threshold to get there. We have people all over the board who have all kinds of different opinions, so it makes it difficult to get in. I like the exclusivity behind it. There are definitely guys who fell through the cracks there. Maybe I would want to be more involved, I guess, in some of the guys who fell through the cracks in the past, like Kenny Lofton, Bobby Grich, Lou Whitaker, stuff like that. But in terms of the voting process currently for the BBWA, I'm good with it. And I know a lot of guys want to expand to 12. If we did, I would probably add David Wright and then maybe Francisco Rodriguez, but I don't know. Maybe with in mind, like he might be in the same ballpark as Kenley Jansen and Aroldis Chapman and Craig Kimbrell moving forward. And that's kind of the group of closers. I wouldn't go past that though. So the 10 maximum, I'm okay with it.
Couple games for you here.
All right.
Simple, straight to the point. Should blank be in the Hall of Fame? I will name a player. You will simply give me a yes or a no. Feel free to dive into it if you want to. Up to you. Should blank be in the Hall of Fame? Barry Bonds.
Yes.
Pete Rose.
I don't think we need to elaborate. What was the second one?
Pete Rose.
I think I'm okay with yes now. And I'll say that I do think that his level of gambling when he was a manager was unacceptable. And people, especially with gambling becoming more prominent, need to know that. But and it does say permanent ban in the rules, which is forever and ever. But I remember that Bart Giamatti, when he had announced the suspension, said lifetime ban, and his life is over now. And Rob Manfred reinstated a bunch of those guys. I will say this. I don't think it's as necessary as so many of his fans think it is, because I could make the argument, and in fact, I'm really sure about this. He became so much more famous for not being in the Hall of Fame than anybody has ever become famous for being in the Hall of Fame.
I say the exact same arguments. I couldn't agree more. Curt Schilling.
Yes.
Let
me add something on Schilling too.
Please.
He would already be in if he didn't sabotage himself. And I'm not talking about politics at all. I'm talking about the last couple of years in the voting when he got over 70% of the vote and he went on Facebook and did a whole big show about how he wanted them to take him off the ballot. and he talked a bunch of trash about the sports writers. And then the next year he said, please don't vote for me. And he got up into like, off the top of my head, I don't know, but it was 74% or so where he got. All he had to do was not say anything and he would have made the Hall of Fame. That's it. Just don't desperately beg people to not vote for you. It wasn't politics at all. I think he wanted to not get in so he could blame politics for whatever reason, but he should be in.
And similar to Pete Rose, I don't mean to speak for anybody here, but I would argue that Curt Schilling is another one of those guys as famous for not being in as he is or would have been being in.
And maybe that was part of what he was doing.
Sammy Sosa.
Yes, but if I'm doing an argument on the PED guys getting suspended for doing something selfishly, I recognize that somebody could make the argument about his corked bat and how he did get suspended. It was only a few games, but so kind of a yes on that, but I never actually had to make the decision, so I didn't think too hard about it.
Don Mattingly.
I think no. Man, he was such a big deal, and he's a good peak candidate. I just don't think he had the longevity, and people could say, oh, it's because he got hurt, but that's part of it, right? Like there's a lot of guys who didn't make it because they got hurt. Like Steven Strasburg's not going to make the Hall of Fame because he got hurt. So I think I'm a no, but I will say this, if he got in, I wouldn't be mad or anything like that.
The last one I have here is Roger Clemens.
Yes. Same thing as Bonds. Like we weren't suspending guys yet. He's obviously one of the most decorated players in history. So yes.
Last game I have for you here. It's a bit of a social trend. We've played it with some of our NFL talent before. Let's put a little MLB flavor here. So I'm going to ask you to not speak. Do not dare speak, Matt Snyder, until I say a Hall of Famer's name. Are you ready?
Yep.
That was a test. You shouldn't have spoken.
Oh, I shouldn't have said it. Start over.
Here we go. Giancarlo Stanton. Tim Lincecum. Andrew McCutchen. Madison Bumgarner. Jacob deGrom. Joey Votto.
Stop. Joey's first ballot, easy. I think. I hope. I mean, he's a yes for me. Stan's interesting because if he gets to 500 home runs, I think there's a chance. A lot of others, I don't know if we're dipping down for pitchers, maybe Bumgarner, but Votto's easy stoppage for me.
Let's do that one more time. It's fun. Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's an early buzzer right there.
Yeah. I had to think. It was close. Yeah, I think so.
All right. One final time. Since I had a little plan going and you decided to ruin it by putting Paul in there for me. Okay. Salvador Perez.
Yeah. Thank you for pausing.
No, this is good.
He's going to be one. It's going to be interesting to see like where the counting stats fall compared to other like power hitting catchers and stuff. But I think we're going to have a well-rounded enough case there with Sal between the Royals' success early in his career, the good longevity, really good at working with pitching staffs, good defense, that power surge. I think we're going to get there with Sal.
Last question I have for you is Shohei Ohtani, if he retired right now, right here today, would he be a Hall of Famer? Would he be voted in?
Technically, no. 8 years service time. They have to have a minimum of 10 years. But I think the real question you're asking is the body of work already good enough to be in the Hall of Fame? So let's get him to 10 years here. He plays one game and he suffers a season-ending injury. And then the next year he plays one game and suffers a season-ending injury. First of all, please no, that would suck. But basically it would be the same body of work with 10 years of service time. I think he'd have to be, right? Like 4 MVPs with all that two-way success, 2 World Series championships with him as the Dodgers' best player, where he's going both ways this past year. Very important starting pitching and offensively. I think the body of work's there already. Even if like the counting stats don't look there, I think you can throw that out the window with Shohei. He's a feel guy, right? Like sometimes I know Ichiro was over 3,000 hits, But sometimes a guy's just a feel guy. Like, you don't even need to look at the numbers. Like Buster Posey coming on the ballot next year. He's got the MVP, 3 Giants titles. He was the most important player on the team for a long time. His counting stats, because he didn't play that long, probably don't look great to a lot of people, but he hit over 300. He's got the hardware, and he's just a feel guy. Like when you talk about Buster Posey, the first thing you think is, oh, he's a Hall of Famer, right? Like Ohtani is totally like that exponentially.
I mean, they made the Ohtani rule already. I mean, we made exceptions to Shohei Ohtani before. Why not?
You could talk about it from an influence standpoint as well on Ohtani, much like I talked about on Ichiro. Like even without the 3,000 hits, there was so much influence there.
Well, the final voting results from the BWAA will be announced on January 20th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on MLB Network. The actual induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame takes place July 26th in Cooperstown. Matt Snyder, our expert, our analyst, our voter, will be on top of it all. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.